Jake. We actually convinced Eric to come join us on the post-election day show, which we jokingly offhandedly said, and then texted him last week, hey, were you serious when you said you'd come hang out with us, or what?
Yeah.
It worked.
We did, yeah. Author, journalist, war criminal. He's here. He's here to give us the rundown of the situation. We need that kind of perspective.
Forget about that one.
Right?
Forget about that one.
Yeah. We're here. We made it. We made it through the week. Kind of. Yeah. Everyone alive. Everyone get a vote in.
You know,
some
of us live in Pennsylvania, so here we are.
I got mine in.
World.
Tried to cheat.
Yeah.
But, you know.
I stuffed 5 of yours in the mailbox down the street. So.
Oh dear. Yeah.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about. We have many things to. I don't even know where we're going to start, other than Eric also got a free Firefly shirt at somewhere along the line at a conference. Is that a conference shirt? I got one of those.
I got this like 6 years ago, I think, during a visit to Firefly.
Nice.
Headquarters in Austin. So,
is that the one? We got the ones at IAC. They were like vacuum packed into like a puck. Like it was like, yeah. Okay.
I had to wear it about 10 times to get all the wrinkles out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. It was cool.
That was money they probably should have spent on the upper stage, is what I was Anyway, what did you bring to drink, Jake? Did you bring some a petito? What you got?
No, well, elections are serious business, so I'm getting serious here today. And I found this absolutely batshit crazy thing here. So this is Quetzal, which is made somewhere in Mexico, but it's beer with tequila in it. Yeah.
Oh my god.
So
show us the bottom of the can. Look at that.
It has a picture of the earth on fire with Aztec Quetzal statues there.
Wow.
So, and I got glass too because I want to see what color it is. It's one of those things where I'm just like not sure what's going on. So let's see. Let's have a look here.
Very good.
Okay.
Here, I'll give you one shot. Yeah, it looks like what I would expect.
Yeah.
Looks
good. Like the color of beer and tequila.
Yeah.
What did you think? It was going to come out bright green, or what was your?
I don't know, man. You never know what's going to happen.
The label like that, who knows? Well, I got a Cloud Walker with a paper airplane on the front. Much less fun front than Jake's epic Earth on Fire dragon, double-headed dragon thing. Is there a head on both sides of that Earth? On that
there is, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you can see.
Double dragon.
Wow.
It's the new Artemis plan rendering.
Eric, what did you bring from the great state of Texas down there?
Well, I am not, don't have a call scheduled with an unnamed rocket CEO this time. So it's just a bit of red wine.
Yes. Man, I always look forward to whoever you book after you do Off-Nominal. I figured that you just use this to warm up, and then you're feeling spicy enough to interview somebody about where they get their fairings.
We get to be your how now brown cow just to make sure that you really got the tongue.
Yep.
Unique New York. Man.
All right. Well, as Eric put it in the email that we were corresponding with before this, what a fucking timeline we're on here. 100% accurate. I think the last time we talked about hypothetical administrators, Jake, and I was throwing around the idea of Culberson, I think that was before Elon was super heavily involved in all of this. So
before Elon bought the campaign, yeah.
Vastly different like tactical consideration now on who might be the administrator of NASA and what might actually be the plan. So I don't know where exactly to dig in on what is going on, but I mean, the biggest question is like, what is the biggest question? Like, are the timelines of Elon's Mars missions that he's been tweeting for the last several weeks of like, we're doing one in 26 and someone's flying there in 2028? Was that just purely selected as he's been part of the campaign and it sounds good to Donald Trump's ears, or what are the tactics there, Eric, as the guy that told me that he's taking a break from writing books about this, but apparently you're not, because this is exactly book content.
I think he's genuinely believes it. It's possible. I'm sure he told Trump, and Trump liked it. And by the way, if you go back to when we were, conceiving the Artemis program in the Trump 1 administration, if you remember those press conferences or those Oval Office events, like they would say something about the moon and say, "Hey," and Trump would say, "Hey, why aren't we going to Mars?" Remember that?
He had a tweet that like dunked on the idea of like we should stop talking about the all caps moon. I think
dunked on the idea, but then like was pressing. I forget who the NASA official was in there that was saying, "Well, why don't we just go to Mars? Why are we going to the moon?" Like at his own Artemis event.
Wasn't it like Peggy Whitson or something? Huh? Wasn't it like Peggy Whitson in the Oval Office or something?
I forget. Honestly, I forget who, because I commiserated with the person afterwards. So anyway. Trump's been more interested in Mars clearly, and Elon has clearly told him that he wants to go to Mars. And I don't know why the hell my watch is doing that. I apologize. They may do it one more time.
You're being tracked right now.
So I've got to go. The big question in my mind is, how does this refocusing of Mars change Artemis? Right? It could be, pretty modest to like, instead of it being, right now the Artemis is Moon then Mars, right? It could be Moon and Mars, or it could just be Mars. Like, I don't think completely canceling the Artemis program is off the table, because the architects of that are gone, right? Bridenstine's not coming back to lead NASA. Pence is not coming back to the White House. I know that Scott Pace has an interest in joining the administration, and obviously there's lots of investment in Artemis from international partners. But, this is a brave new world, right? And Elon has incredible access to Trump, and Trump, at least for the time being, is grateful to him for coming into his campaign in the last months and getting him elected president for a second time. So anything is possible. I do think, legitimately, big picture items like canceling SLS or certainly canceling upgrades to SLS are probably more likely than not. It's just, if they're serious about improving government efficiency, the obvious place to start is in with rockets, where Elon has a reusable rocket that launches for 1/40th the cost of the government's rocket, which launches every 3 years, right? I mean, if you're serious about government efficiency, that's probably where you start in space.
Yeah.
So
every 3 years and counting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, you caught me off guard, because actually I hadn't fully even considered that idea of like a full pivot back from Moon to Mars, and like that kind of like, I don't know. It feels like that costs so much time every time we do that, right?
Who's going to say no to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on what the components are, right? Because the congressional sides can be like, I don't really care where you go, like which districts are you going to put jobs into, but there's some interesting stuff behind that, right?
Well, Ted Cruz is going to be running space policy in the Senate. He's chair of CST in the Senate. The House control of the House remains up for grabs, but there's a chance Babin is chair from Texas, is chair of the House Science Committee. And then, you've got to figure out appropriations, but, Senator Shelby's gone, and this is a Congress now that is going to be, to some extent, especially if the House goes Republican, beholden to Trump's wishes. Mm-hmm. I don't see a full scale cancellation of Artemis, but I just would not say it's impossible.
That's a thinker. Yeah.
I mean, it was just a few weeks ago that Mike Bloomberg wrote, this $100 million plan to nowhere. Yeah. And, I think there is a perception that Artemis costs a lot and is moving too slow, and really NASA has not done a great job of articulating why we're going back to the moon. I do still think, like, ultimately the international partnerships and the competition with China will drive some kind of lunar activity, but it would not shock me to see NASA go all in on Starship if it's already betting Artemis on Starship as like, we're going to the moon to prove out Starship and then to prove out technologies we need to use it to go to Mars. No more of this nonsense. No more of this nonsense about like the Lunar Gateway being a test bed for, a Mars vehicle that we're going to use a century from now, right? It's like, I think they will cut a lot of the stuff from Artemis that we all recognize as being extraneous to getting the job done.
You can almost see that as like a similar analogy to when the space race happened, right? So there was a race to orbit and the Soviets won, and the American response was, well, actually, that's just the step one, and we're actually trying to land on the moon, and then they beat them there, right? So you could almost see that happening here, like, oh, China, it's a race to the moon, and America would be like, well, yeah, you got there first, but we're actually going to Mars, and then they do. That was what we were trying to do. But
I mean, the implications here are pretty broad-reaching across NASA's portfolio, because supposedly NASA is going to announce the revised Mars sample return plan in December. But if the goal is to put humans on Mars in 2028, and look, that's not happening, right? Let's be clear. From a technological standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, very, very, very difficult for me to see that happen, even in a regulatory green light go universe. But if the goal is to get humans on Mars as quickly as possible, then you're not going to spend $5 billion or whatever on a sample return mission that may not even beat your humans to Mars mission, right? That's just nonsensical. So, it's like I said, what you have an entirely unique situation where Trump is president. I mean, for the time being, I think Elon Musk is one of, if not his closest advisors. I mean, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but this is the guy who just won in the election in Trump's eyes. And that's all that matters. And so Elon is going to have broad latitude to make changes here. Again, at least for the time being. And of course, you've got to run things through Congress. But, I think big changes are coming. And it's going to unsettle a lot of people. And look, Elon has made a ton of enemies in this process. He gambled big time, and he won. And so I don't see him sort of being magnanimous and taking input from all sides. I see him sort of as moving forward on his ambitions with the power of the White House behind him.
Yeah, and I think a good check on, or like a good proof on that theory too, is that like if all of this kind of NASA policy, the NASA plans, everything that the NASA and the Congress want to do in space, if all of that is truthfully a political process, we've just seen, like, in my eye, the pretty dramatic political shift in the electorate with this election. Like we're going to be writing about the changes in this election for years, because this, the way the demographics of the voter base on each side changed is like indicative that we're moving from one era to another. To me, that's kind of how I'm kind of seeing that, right? Like Anthony, what did you call it? Like the Obama era, I guess, is sort of like the presidential block, right? Like Obama, Clinton, Biden, Harris, totally. And that chunk of time from, call it the mid early aughts or whatever to now seems to be like bookended a bit, and we're moving into a new political reality, right? And so if that is reflected in the NASA policy, then maybe there is some big changes coming, right? Because all these programs that we're talking about, SLS and Orion, they kind of began at that that era, right?
That's a great point. I would just add that, like, this is an administration where precedent does not matter at all.
Yeah, that's another part of it. Yeah,
this is an administration where conflicts of interest don't seem to matter much at all either, right? There was ample evidence of that in the first Trump administration. And so the fact that Elon Musk is the majority owner of SpaceX, has total decision-making power, is not going to distract too much, at least in the White House eyes, from him sort of being the visionary for space policy in this country. And so the checks on that would be, okay, what do our international partners think? Well, that's Europe. I don't think Trump cares. Even though his administration set up the Artemis Accords. It's ironic, right? That, Trump 1 created Artemis and created the Artemis Accords and all this, and Trump 2 is coming in with someone who, frankly, sort of sees Artemis as a distraction from the real aim. And so the other check is Congress, and we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. And I don't have a great sense. I don't think anyone really does, but it's clear, as you said, Jake, that Trump was elected with a mandate from the U.S. people for change from what is happening, and as elections go in this era, it's a pretty resounding victory. And so I think they're going to bring that attitude to a lot of areas, and space will be one of them, especially since space is Elon's passion project. So, yeah, big changes.
How do you think this tracks with the time period that you were covering pretty well in the book Reentry? I should have had it around for all the plugs, but I think it's right over my shoulder so much. The worry that I had about Elon getting involved with Twitter was first that he just wanted them to turn off the API, so it ruined the third-party clients that I loved using. That was my number one issue with the management of early days of Twitter. Number two is just this thing's a dumpster fire that I don't feel like you should be distracted by when you do really good work in the physical world and innovating on actual atoms, right? How do you feel like the distraction line has gone now that we're this far into the Twitter era where he's been involved there pretty heavily? Do you get a sense from people that are working at SpaceX still that he's been around less and that's good, or he's been around less and that's bad, or he's been around the same because he's always been somewhat dynamic in the places he's appeared?
So I think Elon is still making the big decisions at SpaceX, but he has very capable people working for him to carry out those mandates. Like in the book, I talk about Mark Juncosa, and he is absolutely driving the technical development of Starship. Multiple meetings every day on these issues to kind of keep the ball moving forward. I think the big thing here is not so much that Elon has been distracted by Twitter and his entrance into politics, but the really key change, Anthony, is that over the last few years, SpaceX all of a sudden is not resource constrained, right? Even up through 2020, they had only so much money to go around for different projects. It's become pretty clear that in the last few years, as Starship has ramped up, they have had access to an enormous amount of capital look how many ships and boosters they've built. Look at the launch infrastructure they've built. It's incredible, right? And that is indicative of the billions and billions of dollars that they're pumping into this program, which, again, SpaceX is really efficient with capital, so that, they're doing a lot with the money, but they've never had that kind of spend capability before. So they're moving further and faster. And I think Elon is still providing big picture guidance, but sort of has let the machine running itself.
Yeah. It's you almost need to take a step aside and just kind of appreciate that for a second, the scale of Starship's development, because they've thrown 5 boosters into the water and kept the 6th one, and thrown 6 ships into the water. That's how many 5? They're 200 Raptors or something.
Almost 200 engines.
More engines than any other company's ever made or even thought of, and they just have casually thrown that into the ocean in the last 18 months or whatever it is, right? So not capital constrained is probably putting it lightly.
Yeah, right.
Waste steel, not time, or waste money, not time. Also, they're on ship. What's getting stuck now? 31 and booster 13 or something. It's I know some of them were half built and test beds and whatnot, but this is not. It's not like when someone walks in the room and you start counting your push-ups 1,000, 1,002, 1,003, 1,004. It wasn't that. It's they did mostly attempt most of those serial numbers, and there was metal for most of them. It is.
Yes, Space Launch System 2 is ready to be stacked in Florida, and that's the second rocket in 15
They
years.
did drop that dome once, Eric, and they made that dome again, though.
Okay.
So
this is 2.1.
This is
2.1.
a little bit, It bumps the number up.
2.05, yeah.
There is no comparison, right? So there is a mandate for change, and it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. And look, it makes a lot of people very, very uncomfortable. And I completely understand that. And actually, we get a lot of pushback on Ars for writing stories about Elon Musk that are like anything short of, this guy is destroying the country, right? We would get criticism for that. But, if you sort of sit back and try to look at this neutrally, it is an unprecedented moment for spaceflight, and it's a chance to push back on 60 years of bureaucracy building up at NASA. I've got a piece coming out later today or tomorrow kind of looking at some of these issues, and we're going to find out pretty quickly if they're interested in really improving government efficiency or whether that's just rhetoric.
Yeah.
Because Elon knows full well that NASA does not need 10 field centers, right?
100%. Yeah.
I mean, it needs what, 3, maybe 4 at most? I don't know. So, like, are they going to go and start closing field centers? We'll see.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking about too, because it's like, on the face of it, this idea of like improving government efficiency is like a totally virtuous endeavor, right? And so you have to kind of think of that, but there's lots of ways to go about that, because like you said, they could be doing the right thing, which is like thinking really long term and saying the electorate wants change, and there's like, this is just clogged up, like this system doesn't produce anything anymore, the gears are so jammed up, and so you attack bad processes and streamline things and break down barriers so that the agency can like just get to work and not have to focus on so many red tapey type things. The dark way that this timeline ends up is that they just destroy everything, and then funnel, it's a bad cronyism thing, right? Where it's just like every new NASA program is one that directly benefits SpaceX, and then it's just like, okay, that's not the
they don't need a government program to do that.
No, they don't.
That happens already by the way of SpaceX being really good at all this other stuff.
That's why I hope they don't do that, because it's just like, you guys didn't
that's how
need
it works
a competitive
right now.
edge. You didn't need a competitive edge.
But that's
you're
interesting, because
golden.
usually when you get to moments, if you want to like equate that to something like regulatory capture, where the huge incumbent goes and says, we really need to regulate the market we're in because it's getting dangerous to be this big. The people that vocalize that are usually at the top of the market, but not at the top of their game, where SpaceX is at the top of their game and the top of the market. Usually Zuckerberg rolls into Congress and is like, we gotta really ratchet up these regulations on social media so that we remain like king shit on Poop Mountain and we can sell all the ads, because we're not doing that well anymore, and all the startups that pop up we buy for $1 billion. This is an inverse relationship where it's like, we are so much better at spacesuits. Take spacesuits as an example. There's no reason if this is truly Elon Musk's domain to roll in and say like, we should keep these spacesuit programs running along at this clip, because do you think it's going to be quicker for us to build a backpack or for them to build the whole spacesuit? Right? That's where they're at on their spacesuit development track. The same goes for brand new lunar landers. Do you think it's going to take longer to make that thing land on the moon or build a whole new lunar lander? So it's an inverse dynamic than what you typically see, where people are trying to like go in and snuff out competition. We have the good versions of these things that are actually operating today. I don't know another example of that.
No, I mean that's the whole conundrum here, right? Because if you bring in spaceflight, if you bring in Elon Musk as your space policy guru, right, to make decisions for NASA and the U.S. direction in space, on one hand, it's an enormous conflict of interest, right?
Enormous. Yeah.
This guy, I mean, it's unparalleled.
Let's not
right?
begin to describe it. Like, yeah,
it should not be.
Government already has.
This is actually the thing that all three of us get tweeted as all the time of like, replace NASA with SpaceX. Like that is the track that you're talking about.
Right, and so there's like literally has multi-billion-dollar contracts already. But on the other hand, like his intuitions have been pretty good on space. Like we need to go to reusable launch. Well, the whole industry is moving to reusable launch. LEO internet broadband is really cool, and we're going to do it. And everyone else is trying to do it now too. And there's many other examples of this where like he has changed just as a smaller example, like autonomous flight termination system, just all these intuitions that he has had, to change the way our relationship with space. So it's like, on one hand, it's probably good to have someone like him setting space policy, as opposed to like the chairman of a committee who represents the state of Alabama, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's going to be parochial interests, whereas Elon's interests are generally exploration and settlement. So it's such a weird thing.
You get into a big means versus the ends discussion with that one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So let me throw one in that regard, where Jake, you were talking about like it being a noble endeavor to increase government efficiency, which I wholeheartedly. I mean, I think I said on a recent show, like everyone's that was running for president was like, I'm going to spend a shitload of money and tax no one, and I'm pretty sure both of us need to do the opposite. Like, I think I need to pay a little more taxes, and you need to spend a little less. Like, probably need to balance that out a little bit. So I'm totally game for that. And you spoke about it in a way that like it could just be completely destructive and not necessarily build a better foundation. It could also be the case where like a forest fire comes through and burns a shitload of trees, but that actually creates the fertile soil for more trees to grow. And it being a thing where it's short-term hurt for long-term benefit. But if that were to be applied in a way that it's the opposite for SpaceX. It might be a short-term benefit, but this could be long-term pain because of the political aftershocks post-Trump, post-Elon being involved, that you've created such animus for SpaceX that you better, if you're going to do this, Elon, you better get what's worth it to get in 4 years or maybe 8 years if, the follow-on administration happens. Like, it better be worth it right now in a very short term for you.
I was thinking about that too, because like up until this point, you don't like, if you say, why is SpaceX dominant in the space industry? Like the only real logical argument is that they deliver and they deliver well. Like they make good products and services and they deliver them quickly for a great price. Like they are competitive and there's no one that can really like argue with that in any kind of sane way. Right.
I could point you to some discords that would argue.
Yes, that's why I added "sane" to that sentence. Yes, but if you go through a period that's measured in years, where Elon is putting his fingers on all of the scales inside of the federal government, that there's a way to argue against that. Right? It may not be correct, but there is now a way politically to say the only reason that SpaceX has all of these contracts with the government is because Elon bought his way into the the administration, right? And so like there's a risk there, like politically, in terms of associating yourself with that end of the transaction, right?
What you both said is absolutely correct, and I addressed that in the epilogue of Reentry. I just basically said that the long-term consequences of his deepening political involvement probably are going to be negative, but Anthony's exactly right. For the next 4 years, or as long, I think, as he maintains a great relationship with Trump, and that could
be 4 weeks. It could be 4 months. Yeah,
it could be 4. Yeah, I mean, it's like Trump ran through a lot of people during his first.
I also would say Elon has run through a lot of people. Like
Elon has run through a lot of people.
There are a couple of bridge burners.
Yeah.
Type A personalities who are not accustomed to being.
They might just love burning bridges together now, though.
They're not accustomed.
That might be a thing.
None of them are accustomed to being told no, and in that relationship, Trump is the actual, obviously the ultimate alpha, right? But maybe Elon thinks I don't know what's in his head, but he has. I agree. He has most likely has a 4-year period to effect change, and my sense is the way he looks at that is 4 years is an eternity, and even if we're not launching humans to Mars, we will be so far down that road that even if the government were to stop funding, they can't stop us. Like we will be in an unstoppable moment at that point, and it will be inevitable regardless of what happens. And the way he thinks is he sees that there's an open window for this that could close at any moment due to lack of access to capital, global conflict. You can go on up the apocalypse chain, but like he sort of says that humans have a finite amount of time to reach, Mars, and his lifetime he knows is finite as well. So if there are 4 years where he can, put his foot all the way down to the accelerator in terms of resources, regulation, and all of the other challenges that go and like get perfect alignment, I think he feels like he can make hay for 4 years and actually make this all come together. And we'll see. And
at best,
the other
succeed,
thing is,
at worst, just build massive momentum. So yeah, I mean,
build massive momentum. Yeah, so it's inevitable. And an unanswered question to me though is I don't really understand his full motivations for going all in on Trump.
Yeah.
I don't think it was just because of space, right?
Yeah, no, definitely not.
So we have yet to see where he's really going to put all of his energy, and he may sort of, he may think, well, space is doing fine, so we need to focus on whatever priorities the administration has that he feels fit, or he may get so bogged down in, look, and let's face it, like, there's not that much government to cut outside of Medicare, Medicaid, the entitlements, and the military. So it's
interest payments, but I don't know that Elon's going to help with that unless he.
Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I do not find that being in an environment where he is constrained by 535 people or 565 people in Congress, he will find that very difficult to handle. Because even for Trump, there were lots of checks on his power during his first administration, and that will be the case to some degree in the second administration. And the congressman from Ohio is not going to want to see Glenn Research Center closed, and the congressman from California is not going to want to see Mars sample return canceled. So, it's going to be an ongoing battle, and so it's going to be interesting to see where he spends his energies, and it's
where he spends Trump's energy, right?
Where he spends Trump's energy, right? Trump may see Elon lose a battle and then decide this guy's a loser, and is like, and honestly, what does he need Elon for now? Like, he won the election. I don't think he's running. I don't think he's running again. So, like, he can play golf every day or do whatever he wants, right? He's the president.
He is somewhat enamored by SpaceX rockets.
He is, and I think he likes. Now, look, he will love the idea of humans going to Mars in his lifetime, right? Because I think he grew up in everyone who kind of grew up in that era has an affinity for Apollo, right? And so, like, if the the Apollo program is Kennedy's stamp, right? I think Trump, would be very nostalgic in the fact that have like the Mars program be the Trump program. I think, yes, there is an affinity for that. For sure.
There's a grandeur to it. I mean, and not just Starship. Remember the first time around, he described Falcon Heavy very glowingly. Like, I saw these two things come down, and it was wild, and all this crazy shit. And then the Starship thing that the Kamala campaign tweeted as if this was a bad thing, but I thought pretty much everybody that watched that, all the responses I saw was like, yeah, that's kind of how I felt about seeing Starship get caught, or Super Heavy get caught by these chopsticks. Like, he described it in a very human way of being a completely unbelievable thing that no one else has seen. So it's hard to know, though, does he love it because of the same reason that us three love it, that it is like an incredible technical achievement that is leaning in the direction of space development, or is it an epic thing that he sees as like an American excellence thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's tough to tell. Tough to crack motivations, right?
If you were going about this, if you were Elon Musk right now, you mentioned a bunch of things that could happen within NASA in terms of realignment and reprioritization. But the regulatory side as well has been a thing that obviously SpaceX has been publicly sparring with the FAA. Which things do you think have more of a long-term impact? Where do you think they're all going to start if this theory all does hold true, that this is a legitimate thing that's going to happen with Elon Musk playing with space policy in this way?
I think the one certainty is that there will be very significant regulatory reform. If you go back and look at Trump 1, there was Space Policy Directive 2. Sorry for throwing the numbers out there, but Space Policy Directive 2 took a big crack at trying to, streamline regulations for launches and other activities in space. And they had some success with like remote sensing, but the FAA and to some extent NASA kind of threw up the barriers to meaningful reform. And then in the last few years, we've seen this Part 450 realignment with commercial space launch, and I think the general consensus among industries is that has not worked. So I do think there will be a very meaningful and rapid regulatory reform for commercial space companies. In fact, I'm pretty much certain of that. And again, you're going to have strong alignment in the Senate. That's an issue that Cruz love him. I mean, I guess some people do love him or hate him. I know people hate him. My senator from the great state of Texas, but Cruz has been very active in that area and been very interested in commercial space, probably as much as almost any senator, I would say. So I would expect that to move in the Senate and probably in the House as well. And so I think they'll get the regulatory piece first.
Yeah,
I guess.
I'm really curious to see where that goes in the context of the Chevron decision, right? Because now there's like, the FAA theoretically now has a little bit less authority on deciding the full breadth of the regulation, right? And so you could see a situation where they strip it down to sort of match that authority, right? It's like, okay, you don't actually have this much power, so we're going to reduce what you do and all these kind of things, just kind of match what that precedent is. But you also do have the possibility where Congress comes in and says, okay, well, if the FAA can't decide all these things, then we're going to make some legislation to back it up, right? I don't think FAA regulations are a big priority for Congress, but there is still a possibility that happens, right? And again, that's another situation where the executive has to figure out their relationship with the legislative and see which hills do you want to die on, right? It's going to be one that stands out.
One area we really haven't talked much about, but where I think there are huge implications is Starlink and mega constellations, right? Because it's pretty clear that the U.S. government has been at least somewhat hostile to Starlink, right? With the broadband program and not using the one option that's affordable and available now for rural broadband. So I would expect to see that change. And obviously it would benefit SpaceX, but it might have negative repercussions on trying to sell the service around the world, right, to countries who don't like the Trump administration. We'll have to see. Speaking of regulation, like, we still got to figure out this whole situation of space debris and tracking space debris and managing all of that and communicating with China and everyone else who's flying large numbers of satellites up there in Russia. That is not a solved problem. And obviously Elon Musk coming in has a very one-sided viewpoint of that. I still remember, like, when he had his initial media call with reporters and he was asked about, are you concerned about, having so many satellites up there leading to a debris problem? And his answer was essentially, space is big. So I'm sure he has a much more nuanced understanding of it than that. But, it's like, this is a problem. Like we are seeing increasing numbers of satellite conjunctions. And look, the SpaceX team does a great job of maneuvering its vehicles and keeping this down. But, right now they're the primary operator up there. What is it? Like 2/3 of the number of active satellites now are Starlink? What happens when,
I just said it was way higher than that, but yeah, sure. Point stands.
It's something like that. And so what happens when Amazon has 5,000 satellites up there and, China has 10,000 satellites by two different providers. Europe has its Iris Squared, and Russia has a few hundred satellites with Sphera, and Telesat and Globalstar's, I guess, a Geo. But anyway, there's going to be all these other ones, right? And Elon is going to want a competitive edge for Starlink, and so the other competitors aren't going to really trust, whatever policies he's setting. So that's a huge mess, and I think that's a very, very serious problem, obviously, right, that we're going to have to reckon with as the number of satellites and satellite operators grows in LEO, and you start to see some conjunctions. Like Elon is not going to be the best person to work that solution out, right? Because he's incredibly biased, by owning Starlink. So,
yeah.
I never know what to do with that issue, to be honest. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone just says, we're going to solve it by having a new database where you put all of your orbital elements and then we will visualize them and we will send you the text messages as you need. And that's what everyone says every time. And I don't know. I'm like, why is this one different than the other time that was tried? Is this just a bigger database?
I mean, all I'll say is that I've heard some things that have me concerned that this is a real, serious, immediate problem that is only going to get worse.
I have also heard recently of, like, very close misses that I don't feel like they're not like things that were reported. Sometimes these things get reported out because somebody tweets it. Like, these things went 1 meter apart from each other. Other times, I've just heard like, hey, this was a really close moment for us. And you don't really hear those. But yeah, I mean, obviously at some point they're going to happen a lot more, and there will be an incident that causes tons of issues or another anti-satellite test. I mean, that alone was a huge moment, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're one big collision away from some pretty severe awareness, probably, right?
I'm pretty sure Elon Musk is not going to spend his political capital on orbital debris.
No, he's not. He's not.
Pretty confident of that.
But I would put that pretty high on my list of space policy issues that all of a sudden become urgent during the Trump administration. So, you know.
Yeah. Over the next 4 years, that it's likely there is a situation in that regard.
And so if he's still the Trump's go-to guru or whatever position he's going to have, right? Advisor or whatever, you know, like
space czar.
Other countries and companies are going to look to him for like an unbiased solution to the problem, right?
Yeah. Those sort of like collective group problems are going to be all challenging, right? So Spectrum is probably another one that's like very much going to be a tricky one for him to be a part of, right?
Even on like in space in general, like, you know, ESA and the European countries have long been, you know, partners with NASA, but now if space policy in the United States becomes tied to Elon, they're not going to be comfortable with, you know, working with NASA.
Well, until they stop flying so many of their satellites on Falcon 9s.
Yeah,
might be a small window until Ariane 6 gets up and running regularly.
Yeah, once they clear the backlog, then they can say
once enough Galileo satellites are up.
Until they get Ariane 6 flying, until they have a human spacecraft, until they have the space station. You know, exactly, I mean, right. Like they want to play, but you know, I don't know. It's all like the job of a space reporter just got a lot harder this week, but it also got a lot more interesting. Because of just all the potentials for change and conflict and progress. So we'll see.
So do we want to use some of the remaining time to do like our picks for administrator? Should we do some predictions?
I was going to ask specifically the administrator, but if there's other positions too that, like, you know, we all don't count it as completely unlikely that the Elon and Donald Trump relationship goes out in flames at some point between now and 4 years from now, but people that are picked for the administration for different agencies will likely sustain. NASA administrator, obviously one. Do we care about any of the others, like head of the FAA, other things? Are there other positions that you would track?
We care, but I don't know enough about those areas to have any kind of insight into who would get
then
those
positions.
Let's just
do the NASA administrator one, because that's also interesting. If they're coming for NASA centers, there's going to be major resistance from NASA themselves, but people that work there, political appointees, etc. So there will be some battles to be waged. We haven't heard any NASA transition team names yet, right?
No, I mean, early, right?
There's lots of people like there's some of the usual suspects for people who have been like angling behind the scene, right? There's Janet Kavandi, former Sierra Space person. Scott Pace is interested. Greg Autry is interested. But I don't have any credible names for you guys because first of all, the election was just a couple of days ago, and second of all, you know, if I don't fully know Elon's role right in the new administration, but my sense is that space will kind of, you know, Trump basically is not all that interested in governing, I don't think. You know, he was president last time, but he sort of delegated the actual act of governing to different people. And so, you know, he largely left space to Pence. In this case, I don't think he's going to leave it to Vance, or I don't think Vance is going to want to take that on as one of his major, but I think space will clearly be in Elon's portfolio. And so he will have some say in who the next administrator is. Ethically, I don't know if you could take someone like Kathy Leaders and bring her back as NASA administrator. But
Gerst,
if that were legal, I think that's a possibility. But I don't know. Honestly, I I don't have any good names. I haven't heard names that I feel trust in. And if Elon is going to have a big say in it, you kind of need to wipe the board clean and see where it goes, because it's going to be someone he picks, right? Or has a big say in.
It makes me wonder if there's going to be some sort of like proxy kind of situation where, like, instead of getting someone like competent like a Scott Pace and putting them in charge of it, like you get kind of a figurehead, like maybe some sort of like political appointee, and then something behind the scenes runs policy through that person, right? Just to make the confirmation a little bit different. Like, I almost wonder if that's kind of an angle to not to like break the rules, but if Elon and Trump really want to like be a disruptor, they're going to like find a way to do things as quickly and get past as many checks as they can, as fast as they can, right? And that's kind of one way you could do that.
I mean, if you go back to the Obama administration, I mean, Charlie Bolden was the administrator, but Lori Garver was the person there who was doing the work of the actual work of the administration and had the president's trust. And so you could kind of see the same case where, by the way, I know Culberson pretty well. I can't imagine he'd be the next administrator, but boy, he'd be a great source if it was. So I'm all for that. But I you could see a situation where there was a political leader chosen to lead NASA, but then a deputy came in who was like maybe Kathy or someone like that, who understood NASA and knew where to make changes.
We could ask her ourselves, but do you think Elon would talk Lori Garver into taking a position in a Trump administration NASA administrator position, since she didn't get the shot under Hillary Clinton? Here's why. Let me run this down. Also, Phil McAllister's deputy administrator, just to really throw a wrench into things. I'm thinking of the type of person that they're going to want to see in that position. If we are doing the whole government efficiency thing, talk about cutting costs, finding efficiencies, like, point me to a person that Elon would have more respect for in that role before than Lori Garver. Like, I don't know.
I don't see it. I
can't imagine her saying yes to it, but
I think he would want someone who he knew had worked for him before and took orders, right?
Yeah.
Or took responsibilities. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw it enough.
He
There was a
Trump
story
or he being Elon?
Elon. So I don't know if you saw it, but there was a story in the New York Times yesterday about how Elon had already been advising Trump to hire SpaceX people into senior DoD positions, right? So I could definitely see that at NASA, where even it's not like a deputy or administrator, but it could be like the AA position or something like that, which is the top civil servant or top position. I don't know. Like Jim Free came in during, but again, I think it's just really difficult without knowing Elon's actual role to name names of people who are likely to end up in that position.
Let's name characters of people. I don't think it's going to be an astronaut.
No, I can guarantee it won't be an astronaut. If Elon has I'm not going to tell this story here, but it won't be an astronaut.
Good enough. It's not going to be a politician? Probably not.
Could be. I wouldn't rule it out. The last two have been politicians.
Yeah, but if it's somebody that still, I don't think Elon will have decision-making power over it. I think he will have veto power over whoever the name is.
Why wouldn't he have decision-making power?
I don't know, because it's a good point.
Hey, Mr.
Because
President,
the Senate has decision-making power, Eric.
I think
the Senate
this person
has decision-making power.
That's the separation of powers.
I think this person would be a good NASA administrator, and he loves you. He thinks you're a great president.
That's true. Yeah. Look at this tweet.
Done. Booked. Send tweet.
Like Trump has things he cares a lot more about than space, right? So he's going
100%.
to. I think
he's going to say, yeah, whatever, sure, that sounds good. But
that's why I think an Obama deputy administrator coming back. No way. I mean, no, sorry. It's not going to happen.
If I were him, I would do it because, like, if that's the point. I mean, I guess this gets at your earlier point of we're going to find out quickly if they really mean it or if they sort of mean it.
Yeah.
For a couple of my canaries in the coal mine is administrator pick. You mentioned the FCC and the broadband program that was out there. If they really mean it, they will just cancel the whole thing. If they sort of mean it, they will re-award SpaceX the money. SpaceX didn't need that money to do the thing. I find this as proof as that was a really shitty program that should have been canceled and not run. not proof that SpaceX should get $1.1 billion or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So that is a moment where we'll find out if they mean it or not. Do they just cancel the whole thing, or do they re-award the money? I still can't tell how much I will read into Artemis level manifest. It's trickier to me because I think I don't know. It's a lot of that feels like a logjam that is better got at by the direction of like we're shutting down some field centers, we're realigning programs, we are making more structural changes than updating the manifest that every president has updated for the last 20 years. That's too easy. Like that is not. Yeah. That's surface level if you're not addressing the things the way that we've gotten to that point within NASA policy. But
yeah, the structural changes will be the key, right?
You got anyone, Jake? You got nothing. No thoughts from outside, from your foreign nat?
The foreign nat perspective. No, I don't even know if I'm allowed to go to the United States anymore. So we'll see how that goes. But,
no,
not from the border you would cross from right now. You'd have to fly home.
Yeah. They're going to ask me a lot of questions if I go over that. No, I mean, I think I have the same insights, like just the names that you'd kind of expect, right? Autry and Pace were two that are on my radar. The Culberson one is I still like the theory. It's a fun thing to think about, but I don't know how likely it is.
I don't think it gets at the point of doing NASA more efficiently. No. It gets at running NASA with
it gets at the Europa lander, but that's about
yeah. It's like his point would be do more shit like that, you know. But.
Yeah. What if we went to Europa?
Honestly, after hearing Zerbukin on here 2 weeks ago or whatever, the way that he talks about some of the money decisions behind the programs that were in his purview, I'm like, that's a pretty good. He's got a very frank way to look at it. Like, I don't mind that.
No, I think my only other like leading theory that feels in any way novel is like a figurehead. So like some sort of a political appointee, like a political person that doesn't really have a ton of space background or space expertise, but someone who, like you said, Eric, would say yes, right? And that I can see happening. Like I can imagine a lot of scenarios where there's someone like that. If we're talking characters, right?
I mean, Culberson's not a bad choice since he's someone who is interested in space policy and has fought those battles and is now out of office and is a Republican. I just don't think he'd want to do it, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Who was Bridenstine's deputy? I'm like totally brain farting on this. Who was the deputy under Bridenstine?
Well, it was Morhard at the end.
Two, right? Yeah, there was... Wow, we're having our
like... It's been so many years.
I can't believe I remembered the name
Tim
Morhard.
Kaine moment here. Yeah.
Wow. We're doing
totally
great,
blanking.
Guys. We're killing it.
Totally blanking.
I need to know.
That shows you how much air Bridenstine took out of the room when he was involved at NASA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, James Moore.
I was going to say that we did see Bridenstine give...
David Newman.
David Newman. No comment. No,
she was...
Oh my God.
She was left over from the Obama administration, wasn't she?
Oh, well, then it was just Morhard, it says.
Yeah, she was in there till January 2017, and then Morhard was...
all the way through, yeah.
Krista Pekin was active deputy administrator from September 2017 to May 2018.
Oh, because of the lag and...
I don't think I've ever heard her name before. No. Seriously? Like...
What we're learning from this conversation is the deputy administrator is a key role.
It was under Obama. Absolutely.
Sorry, Laurie.
Yes. So far in this show, we've insulted Laurie's position and asked her if she wants an appointment in the Trump administration. She's never coming back on.
Quite frankly,
Laurie, do you want to take the actual job instead of the one you had?
Pam Elroy has done a lot of work for, as deputy NASA administrator.
For Mars.
So that was your vibe of if Kamala won, she would have stayed on as admin.
My sense is that if Kamala won, Pam was going to be administrator. And there would be some changes, but no significant shakeups. And I think, my sense and started thinking about this and talking to people.
That sounded like what we were headed for, Eric.
But just my sense is that there's the potential for so much more to happen now, and we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Like I think you cannot overstate the fact that any big changes are going to have to be worked through with Congress, and while there will be a lot of people in Congress who support the Trump administration, the power of parochial politics is very, very difficult to overcome, and that's really what's driven a large amount of what we've seen from NASA over the last 15 or 20 years, and probably before that even.
Well,
all right.
This will obviously be what we talk about for the next several years, so I don't think this is the last of it. Eric, plug the book. I'm getting it. Plug it.
Thanks, man.
Plug the book.
Hey, it's doing really well. It's the story basically of how SpaceX built the Falcon 9 rocket and Dragon spacecraft. It's got lots of positive feedback. It was a USA Today bestseller. So lots of people seem to like it. Check it out.
I know we're all looking forward to book 3, which charts Elon's path into politics. It's going to be good ones.
Can't wait for that epilogue.
I mean, honestly, like
the rise and fall of Twitter.
Someone already wrote that book, I think. The Liftoff and Reentry really were about like the company, and they were not so much Elon focused books, but they were focused on the engineers who did the work. Yeah. And I think that was the right way to go. But now Elon is going to be the star of the show for the next however long this lasts, and it's going to be fascinating to follow.
Bets on the next Starship launch?
It's going to happen in 11 days. What do you mean?
I know. What's going to happen? Give me. Is it going to be?
It's going to be a success.
What are they going to do with this in-space propulsion situation?
They're gonna light up a Raptor so that I think they can start flying Starlinks next year.
I know. Which way are they going to boost it? This was my dumb theory last time. We were debating on like when they light up the engine, which way are they going to be pointing the rocket? Because they can't go full orbit, right? Well,
the big question in my mind is: are they going to try to start landing starships back at Starbase? Which I was really concerned about the regulatory issues of flying over Mexico and landing in Texas, but in about 2 months. Maybe we're gonna
see the way back in,
and they're coming right in to Texas.
Maybe we'll get the dark timeline though. Is the next flight blows up on the pad because of some problem, and then Trump loses interest and loses all favor, and it's just gone. It's over before it starts.
Jeez, that is dark. God.
I have to say, I'll just as sort of you mentioned that as being a dark timeline. Like I wrote a story yesterday on Ars and basically saying, hey, look, they announced that their next Starship flight is no later than later this month. Blah 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 blah. The very first comment was, I hope the rocket blows up on the pad. So there you go, Jay.
You found my alt account.
Eric, you retweeted something that I tweeted like 2 weeks ago, and it got into that network of people that hate you, and now they tweet at me occasionally. So I have like the smallest sampling of the people that come at you on the internet, and I'm like, this is a interesting look into that side of Twitter that Eric deals with all the time. So I was called a brown-nosed blogger, so that person definitely looked into what I do, which is great. I think it might have been Jeff Faust's alt, apparently, Jake. Fan blog. It was a long-standing dream that I had about Jeff Faust needing to cite us in Space News at some point and crediting us as a fan blog, and me being distraught over that. And then I woke up and I was like, well, that was weird.
That's pretty weird.
That's pretty weird. So
yeah.
Anyway, that's what we got.
Anyway, yeah. Eric, thanks so much for joining us today. This is good. Let's speculate 15 minutes after the election talk is always fun. So.
We'll all look dumb in a few years for sure.
Yeah, we'll all look really, really stupid pretty soon. A few years, it'll be like 12 weeks. This administration will be completely different than what it is right now. So.
All right, y'all. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Peace.